Organizational Behavior, Chapter 10. Class agenda. This chapter is talking about ability. What does it mean for an employee to be able? Cognitive ability, emotional ability, physical ability. How important is ability? Application, hiring high cognitive ability employees. Again, we've got our model, organizational model. The definition of ability. The relatively stable capabilities people have to perform a particular range of different but related activities, in contrast to skills, which are more trainable and improvable over time. A function of both genes and the environment. Amount attributable to each source depends on somewhat of the nature of the ability. What does it mean for an employee to be able? So we've got three classifications. We've got cognitive, emotional, physical. Ability refers to what people can do. Personality refers to what people are. Remember that. Ability refers to what people can do. Personality refers to what people are. You often hear in management, you hear in my world, consulting and training, managers don't manage people, they manage personalities. Cognitive ability. Cognitive ability. Capabilities related to the acquisition and application of knowledge in a problem solving. It is relevant to most jobs and occupations. Different types of cognitive ability contribute to employee effectiveness. So we've got verbal, qualitative, reasoning, spatial, and perception. We'll talk about those in a second here in more detail. So types and facets of cognitive ability. So when we look at them again, here's verbal. Verbal is going to be your oral and written comprehension, understanding written and spoken words and sentences, oral and written expression, communicating ideas by speaking or writing that so others can understand. And you see jobs were relevant. So for people who are going to be professionals, here's a couple of things that you must be able to do. One, you must be able to speak clearly and people understand you and can relate to what you're saying. But then you must also be able to write and articulate things as well. So as a professional, if you struggle with oral speaking or you're afraid of speaking and you don't write well, those are issues that can affect your career. There are some people in some careers, they're required to, that's what they primarily do. So in order to do that, you have to be able to, in order to be able to do those jobs, you have to be able to do this. But in professional capacities, these are certain areas where people expect you to be at least be functional in those. Quantitative, number facility, performing math operations quickly and correctly, mathematical reasoning, selecting the right method or formula to solve a problem. So if you look at performing math operations quickly, this is probably where you're talking about folks who may be doing stuff along the lines of mixing up stuff. And they have to get the right quantities right. If they're making something, whatever, if they're manufacturing something, if they're mixing up something, they have to get the right quantities right. So you have to be able to measure. People who handle money, people who are in counting, have to look at that. Mathematical reasons, selecting the right method or formula. You think in terms of scientists and people who may be involved in people like NASA and things along those lines, looking at mathematical formulas. Reasoning, problem sensitivity, understanding where there is a problem or when something may go wrong. So reasoning, problem sensitivity is understanding not only do you have a problem, but also it's anticipating a problem. Where might it be? And what will you do if that problem should come up? Deductive reasoning, applying general rules to specific problems. So this is where you actually start with a kind of like with a hypothesis and something or a belief or some type of conclusion and looking to apply to specific problems. Inductive is combining specific information to form those conclusions. So they're opposite. You're starting kind of with a situation in inductive reasoning, deductive reasoning, and trying to find the rules that apply to it. In inductive reasoning, you're actually combining specific information to try to figure out what's going on. You don't have a conclusion. You don't have one way or the other. You kind of follow the trail to see where it leads you. Originality is developing new ideas. This is for people who are actually into problem solving and they're dealing with things that are unfamiliar with them. Totally. There are some people who are comfortable doing this. There are others who are not. Working with that means trying to come up with something original. I got to come up with something that nobody else has ever come up with. Spatial orientation, knowing where one is relative to objects in the environment. So realistically, this would be if you were out in the woods, you knew when you went in, where you went in. As you traveled, you had an idea that you were traveling in a certain direction. Spatial orientation would be is if you didn't have a map and your compass stopped working, could you get back there? Could you figure that out? And if you could, you would have good spatial orientation. Now, some people would totally be disoriented because they have bad spatial orientation. Visualization, imagining how something will look after it has been rearranged. This is when you think about people like interior designers, architects, people who build houses, people who build the cars of the future. They have visualization. This is something that a lot of us don't possess, that we can look at nothing and see something. But there are people who make their living doing that. Perceptual, speed and flexibility of closure, making sense of information and finding patterns. So perceptual is being able to say, you know what, let me look at this stuff and let me draw some type of conclusion based on what I'm seeing. Making sense of information and finding the pattern. And I see kind of what's going on here. So I perceive this is the problem, and this is the nature of that problem. Perceptual speed is comparing information objects with remembered information. Basically, this is how fast you can do it. How fast can somebody do it? Perceptual speed. Verbal ability refers to the capabilities associated with understanding and expressing oral and written communication. And you have to remember that verbal does not mean just speaking, it's also written. Oral comprehension is the ability to understand spoken words and sentences. So oral comprehension is if you hear somebody speaking and they're using words, whether they're technical or medical or whatever else, you understand what those words are. Written comprehension is the ability to understand written words and sentences. Okay, if you're reading something, do you understand what you're reading? And are you comprehending? Because if you do not, then you cannot draw a logical conclusion, or your conclusion will be flawed. Oral expression refers to the ability to communicate ideas by speaking. Can you make an oral comment, a statement, or argument that actually communicates to others, that people can understand what it is and where you're coming from? Written expression refers to the ability to communicate ideas in writing. Same difference. Most important in jobs in which effectiveness depends on understanding, communicating ideas and information to others. And there are quite a few jobs like that. Quantitative ability refers to two types of mathematical capabilities. Number facility refers to the capability to do simple math operations such as adding, subtracting, etc. Self-explanatory. Mathematical reasoning refers to the ability to choose and apply formulas to solve problems that involve numbers. Again, we're getting into things like science and the medical field, things like aerospace. Important to jobs and occupations involving statistics, accounting, and engineering. Also important to lower level jobs such as cashiering. Cashiers have to do basic math. When you look at accountants and engineers, they're dealing with a lot of numbers. Particularly engineers are dealing with different types of math that most of us would probably not have to deal with. Or it's too complex for us. Reasonability. A diverse set of abilities associated with sensing and solving problems using insight, rules, and logic. Problem sensitivity is the ability to sense that there is a problem or one is likely to occur. So when you work in a field and you work it in an area and you understand that, hey, there's a possibility there is a problem or there's a high probability one may occur. And what do I do about it? This is actually a proactive measure. Deductive reasoning refers to the use of general rules or hypotheses as a starting point to solve a problem. So this means I've already made a conclusion that this is kind of what's happened here. Now I have to go actually and work backwards to prove that. I'm starting with what I believe happened. Now I got to go ahead and prove that. A hypothesis is an educated guess. And by me having the education experience, this qualifies to me to make a hypothesis. Inductive reasoning refers to the ability to generate a hypothesis and plausible solution from pieces of information. So I'm following the information, pieces of information, and based upon what I found, I'm going to come up with a conclusion and hypothesis. Originality refers to the ability to develop clever, novel ways to solve problems. Okay, originality means I'm dealing with a problem, and I came up with a way to solve it that no one else did, because no one else even understood the nature and scope of this problem. That's originality. Those are the kind of things when you find people who are entrepreneurs or in the business world, they excel in the business world and they move up the ranks quick because they can see things before other people can. Or entrepreneurs, a lot of times they end up being very successful because they came up with a novel way to solve a problem that no one else knew how to solve. And sometimes no one else even knew it was a problem. Reasoning ability is crucial to diverse jobs, including medical, law, criminal justice, designing, and writing. Spatial ability. Capabilities associated with visual and mental representation and manipulation of objects in space. Spatial orientation refers to a good understanding of where one is relative to other things in the environment. Remember the example I gave you of going in the woods, not having a map and your compass stopped working. Visualization is the ability to imagine how separate things will look if they are put together in a particular way. So visualization is still something when you find like people who are like engineers and people who may architects and people work in aerospace and stuff, because before something can come together, they have to visualize that two things come together, what it would look like and what it would work like. People with these abilities can be more easily find their way without a map, or often excel at interior design or fashion styling. Perceptual ability refers to being able to perceive, understand, and recall patterns of information. Speed and flexibility of closure refers to the being able to pick out a pattern of information quickly in the presence of distracting information. So when you like project managers, when they're working on large projects and they have a lot of moving parts and a lot of information coming at them, the speed and flexibility in which they can make decisions and extract something is crucial. It's crucial for them. So when we look at perceptual speed, refers to being able to examine and compare numbers, letters, and objects quickly. So this is how quickly can they do it. Something else that you find with some of these project managers, leaders. How quickly can they do something? Jobs requiring high perceptual ability, including code breaking, proofreading, sorting, and categorizing things. Knives Out. Knives Out is a whodunit movie, and starring Daniel Craig as the lead investigator and the lead character in there. And basically, it's about a rich man. His family comes together for his will, and they're trying to figure out who done it. Who killed him? They believe he didn't die of natural causes. They believe somebody killed him. So Daniel Craig is there, and he's kind of like a Sherlock Holmes character, and he's trying to figure out who did it. And he has a good idea who did it before he gets started stuff. And so during the course of the movie, he's got to prove or disprove that is correct. Actually, some pretty good entertainment. And there's a whole series of movies associated with this character. So maybe some good watching for you if you're interested in that. General cognitive ability. General cognitive ability, explanation for the cognitive consistency in the levels of different cognitive abilities within a person. For example, People who have higher than average verbal abilities also tend to be high level average on reasoning, quantitative, spatial, and perceptual abilities. So when you look at some folks, by virtue of them having some abilities, you can almost infer that they have some others. Sometimes referred to as the G factor, or simply G, similar to the ability tested by intelligence quotient, which is IQ test. High IQ is related to better health, economics, and life satisfaction. So when we look right here, this is what we're referring to, that G factor. You see verbal, quantitative, reasoning, perceptual, spatial. You see where they all intersect right there. That's the G factor. And that's that sweet spot when you find some of these leaders who actually can have all these things going on and they actually have that G factor working for them. These are people who actually can be very successful in organizations. Emotional ability. This is tied to emotional intelligence. This is something that is very big today. You hear this a lot. I'm actually certified in emotional intelligence to do those assessments. And this is what a lot of organizations are doing right now because they want to be able to determine, find out a set of abilities related to the understanding and use of emotions that affect social functioning, influences the degree to which people tend to be effective in social situations regardless of their level of cognitive abilities. So what I'm referring to is this. They are realizing now that a lot of times leaders are failing in corporate America and in leadership positions, regardless of what field of endeavor, not because they're not intelligent, not because they're not educated. It's because they're low in emotional intelligence and they don't know how to relate to people or deal with people appropriately. And that's what emotional intelligence is all about. And it starts with this. It starts with self-awareness. Before you start assessing emotional intelligence, it's two-pronged. The first thing is this: self-awareness. The appraisal and expression of emotions in oneself includes the ability to understand the types of emotions being experienced and the willingness to acknowledge them and the capability to express them naturally. Examples of low self-awareness are people who might not admit to themselves or show others that they're anxious when starting a new job. Not expressing the emotion can increase stress and behavior can be misinterpreted by others. So self-awareness is a form of, and a lack of self-awareness is a form of like denial. You won't admit, basically, I tell anybody, before anybody can improve or fix a problem with themselves, the first thing that has to happen is self-awareness. If you don't have that, and if they don't acknowledge that, you can't proceed and move forward. So the first rung in emotional intelligence is self-awareness. Again, it starts with self. Here's the second part of emotional intelligence. Others. The appraisal and recognition of emotions in others refers to the ability of an individual to recognize and understand the emotions that other people are feeling. People are high in this aspect, are sensitive to others' feelings, and can anticipate the emotions that people will experience in different situations. People low in this aspect do not effectively sense others' emotions and may act in a way that worsens the situation. So realistically, this is where these leaders, when it comes to tapping into others' feelings, they are empathetic. Empathetic means they relate to other people who are going through something. Sympathy and sympathetic means you feel sorry for them. That's not the same thing. They can relate to them. And so realistically, they know what to say to somebody when in certain situations. And they're right. People who are low in this can say things and do things that make things worse. And I give you an example. There was a situation where one man came to work and he was down that day. And he was down because his dog had just died. His dog was like his best friend, a member of this family. His wife and kids loved it. And it really hurt the whole family. Well, when his manager asked him what was wrong, he told him. And the manager consoled him and understood what it was and told him, hey, if you need anything, you're your family, let me know and I'll be there for you. So sorry to hear about this. Well, when that manager spoke with another manager about it, and he was like, the other manager said, I don't understand. It's just a dog. Why don't they just buy another dog? That right there is low. in emotional intelligence. How he could not relate and did not care about the feeling of the man about his prized possession, his animal, which he considered a member of the family. Emotion regulation, the ability to quickly recover from emotional experience, refers to both negative and positive emotions. Examples: not holding on to a negative encounter with another driver during rush hour, not allowing the good news of a pay raise to interfere with your normal workday. So for instance, if you're going to work and someone rides by you and yells obscenity and throws some soda on your car. Now, you get mad and go through road rage and you want to go after them or whatever, or do you say, you know what? Yeah, you're mad, you're upset, but you regroup. You say, you know what? That's not the right thing to do. I could endanger myself and someone else if I jump out my car and speed after this guy to go curse him out or throw something at him. And when you look at the second part, you got good news, you got a raise, but you're so happy with that raise that for the rest of the day, you don't do anything. Now you're there, but you're not productive. So as you can see, emotions can work how when you don't keep those emotions in check, good or bad, you can get a negative result. Use of emotions. The degree to which people can harness emotions and employ them to improve their chances of being successful in whatever they are seeking to do. So when employees harness their positive emotions, they can produce the solutions that are more creative. For example, psyching oneself up to overcome a challenge is more helpful than giving in to self-doubt. So you've often heard, or you will hear, emotions, don't let emotions dictate how you make decisions and what you do. And I've always said, well, that's not necessarily true. Good emotions, when you use emotions in a positive way and they're good, can render positive results. What they should have said is, don't let bad emotions dictate what you say and what you do, because they will get bad results. And the use of them, even when you're trying to sell something to someone or an idea to someone, if you have emotions associated with it and you're upbeat, this person you're talking to will feel it. And you have a much higher chance of success by actually showing positive emotions and using it to your advantage. Applied emotional intelligence. How can understanding emotional intelligence be useful to managers? Used in staffing and training practices. Recruiters who are high in some aspects of emotional intelligence are more effective than those who score low in the same areas. Why? Because they tap into people's emotions. First of all, let's digress. The recruiters are always, these people are always into self-awareness. So they know how self-awareness means. I'm aware of my emotions, thoughts, and feelings. First of all, they do that. The second thing they do is they're aware of the emotions, thoughts, and feelings of others. So if they are in tune with their own feelings and they understand someone else's, then they can tap into that. And so they are much more successful than those who score low in those areas. New hires selected on the basis of high emotional intelligence perform better and stayed longer in case studies such as the U.S. Air Force and L'Oreal. So when you have people who are actually hired in emotional intelligence, they said they perform better and you have more longevity with them as far as staying with your organization. Dark side emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence may give individuals the gift of influencing others, which can be abused, gossiping, harassing them. So here's what my experience has shown me. The dark side of it is you can use your emotional intelligence to be manipulative of other people and try to influence them in ways and stuff to get them to do things you want them to do. Not necessarily the right thing, but the thing that you want, or get the result that you want, not necessarily the best result. So it can have a dark side. Assessing emotional intelligence. Tests that measure emotional intelligence. We have all types of tests out there. It's SAT style assessments with questions having correct and incorrect answers. Emotional quotient inventory, EQI, asks 133 questions about behaviors and preferences and measure personality traits for the emotional abilities. Short assessments designed specifically to assess each of the four facets of emotional intelligence. I'm certified in the emotional quotient inventory, and It does. And what it does, it asks you a series of questions, and it asks you the same questions different ways. And that's how it tries to get to not only determine what type of your level of EQ, but it'll detect someone is actually being deceptive as well. Here's a short one, emotional intelligence assessment. Here's a short one that you can take. You see the average score is 19, so you can take that on your own to see how you may score on that. Physical ability. Importance varies according to the nature of the job. So for this, I'm going to try to make this as easy as I can. So I'm going to use sports analogies for this. So when we think in terms of physical ability, we think of strength. Okay, let's put it out there, strength. Weightlifters. Let's use the Olympics, for example. If you look at the weightlifters in the weight competition, they're measuring strength, sheer strength. When we look at stamina, the ability of the lungs and circulatory system to work efficiently for a prolonged period, we're looking at the swimmers for long distance, and we're looking at long distance runners. Flexibility and coordination, this would be individuals like your gymnast. And also your divers in the high diving in the Olympics. Psychomotor capacity and stuff. When I think of this, I'm gonna tell you what comes to mind. It's not the Olympics, it's not sport, but the Rubik's Cube. Trying capacity to manipulate or control objects. I think of the Rubik's Cube as a prime example. Sensory capabilities associated with vision and hearing. What you hear and what you see. Are you picking up on those things? Are you hearing and seeing things correctly? So physical ability here, you can pause and read this on your own. It's kind of what I referred to earlier. Continuation of that. And when we look at what does it mean for an employee to be able, okay, this is not as simple as it sounds. I want you to look at the chart right here, and it's multifaceted. In order for someone to be the overall ability to be able, look what kind of needs to happen. Things that you got to understand is happening that you weren't aware of. First of all, you look at the green categories at the bottom. I won't read all of those, the green categories. And you look at the three of those. Look how the first category feeds into cognitive ability. See, that's mental. The next category, how these feed into emotional category. That's your emotions and your feelings. Look at the next category, how it feeds into physical. This is actually doing something physical. Bring those three together to get overall ability. That's how you get that, is through bringing all three of those together. How important is ability? General cognitive ability is a strong predictor of job performance. Employees who score higher on tests of cognitive abilities tend to fulfill the requirements of the job descriptions more effectively than employees who score lower across the jobs. Cognitive ability is more strongly correlated with task performance than with citizenship behavior. So no correlation is found between cognitive ability and organizational commitment. So when we look at this and we see, listen to this, cognitive ability is more strongly correlated with task performance than citizenship behavior. So in other words, because I have the cognitive ability, I can be a good performer, but I might not be a good citizen or good with people in the group. That's what that means. And so it also means there's no correlation found between cognitive ability and organizational commitment. So because I am a good performer and I have cognitive ability, it does not mean that I have a certain level of commitment to the organization. Here, when we see cognitive ability and we see job performance, we see there's a strong representation right there when we look at the green arrow. When we see cognitive ability and organizational commitment, we see it actually has a weak, because it does not relate strong to organizational commitment. Because someone's good at a task does not mean that they have a strong commitment to your organization. Application. Hiring high cognitive ability employees. One of the most widely used measures of cognitive ability is the Wonderlic Cognitive Ability Test. It has 50 questions in 12 minutes. A score of 17 is a minimum suggested score for an unskilled laborer. A score of 21 is equivalent to an IQ of 100, which is average. A score of 28 is the minimum suggested score for upper level managerial and executives. So when we look right here, here are examples of the Wonderlic questions that it would ask. Pause and read through each of those and make your selection and see how you do. And this is a continuation of that. So if you look right here, you see suggested minimum Wonderlic scores for various jobs. Do you see any field up here that you may be interested in? So cognitive ability tests and discrimination in hiring. The use of cognitive ability tests for hiring may be unintentionally discriminate against groups of individuals who tend to score lower. Given the importance and value of fairness and diversity, these tests should be used with great caution. Possible to use a combination of tests that predict job performance well, but do not disadvantage any particular group. For example, one option is to combine a cognitive ability test with assessments of emotional intelligence and personality. Another option is to decrease emphasis on cognitive ability when hiring and instead provide enhanced training and support. So these things, I've actually heard of this every now and then where lawsuits have been filed alleging discrimination against a particular group of people. Depending upon who you are, your background, what group you belong to, you could find yourself in a situation where people are actually not getting opportunities to seek employment or get jobs because some of the tests that they may administer may be deemed discriminatory in nature. And this happens more frequent than what you would think. So now people are aware of that. So they try to be proactive and try not to do things that will put them in this category, because here's why. When I say discriminatory in nature, that means a lot of times lawsuit. Lawsuit means money, payouts. So organizations who might be inclined to do this are probably not going to do it because they don't want to be sued. That concludes chapter 10.